So we're still looking to support society with our member get a member. You could scan this QR code to get to that chapter website. For every member that you get interested and joins, you get a free webinar for the first member. Second member, you get a free 1-year membership extension. The third one, a 50 Amazon gift card. And for every member, you also get a raffle into the grand prize, which is a trip to the ASSP annual PDC, which I believe is in Denver this summer. So yeah, go ahead and scan that. What's really cool is they have a form letter. You just kind of enter their name and email onto the website, and they will auto send an email for you. You could also edit that email if you wanted to make it a little bit more personal. Calling all CSPs and future CSPs. So our chapter is looking to help facilitate a study group for anyone studying for the CSP exam. A good way to get a different perspective, share resources. We're also asking any current CSPs to maybe contribute any old study materials or offer any advice. So if you are interested in participating in the study group, please email or text me. We will probably have a combination of some in-person events and maybe some video get-togethers as well. Our next happy hour meeting is going to be virtual. It's on January 25th. You can scan the QR code to register for the event. It's from 5 to 6 p.m. We're going to meet here at Google Meet and do a little bit of trivia, have some fun, bring a beverage of your choice, and we'll share some good times. If you're looking to get in person, we've got you covered as well. The Carpenters International Training Center over at 215 and I-15. We're going to be touring their facility from 3:30 to 4:30 on February 8th. I will put that registration link in the email or in the chat box as well. Whether or not you can make that tour, still come out to our networking mixer that same night from 5 to 7. It's right down the street at Home Plate Grill and Bar. They have a nice smokeless room that we usually use, and just grab some bites and some drinks. We have our Region 2 Super Meeting coming up next month, February 8th. It's being put on by the Rocky Mountain chapter. There's the QR code to scan for that registration. The topic is the Introduction to Flammable Liquids and Combustible Dust Risk Assessment. So very cool topic. You could meet with them and get to know some regional folks as well. I'll put that registration in the chat box later as well. For more information on our local events, this is the QR code to our website. We have these technical meetings online the third Tuesday of each month. The mixers, we try and do 2 to 3 each quarter. And then if you want to get in touch with us at all, here's all of our information, our website, our LinkedIn profile, and our email address. Please reach out to any of us or myself. We'll get going with a few committee updates, communications. I don't know, Ruby, if you want to mention anything since you're on the call. But if not, communication. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ruby.
I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself, but for communications, we're still calling on some volunteers if you'd like to help out the chapter. We do meet every so often to strategize on how we're going to send our emails, our newsletters, and also post on our social media. And we have decided to use permanently this Canva app that would help us artistically make everything look really nice and professional for everyone. So please, if you'd like to join and help us out, please contact Ben or Russell.
Yeah, thanks, Ruby. And the cool thing about communications, it's a really small app. It's not a big commitment. And we have a lot of videos pre-made to kind of guide you through how to send out an email, or some of the back of house stuff to make a post, things like that. So a small commitment, but it's a big help to our chapter. Finance committee, the big news from the finance committee is we are moving forward with creating a education fund. The purpose of this fund is going to be to offer grants to our members to pursue education opportunities, whether that is purchasing a webinar, attending a conference, sitting for an exam, getting different CEUs. There will be an application process, and all the details are kind of still being sorted out. But we look to be providing some more member benefit through this education fund. The society offers something similar, but this is going to be only for our members. Membership committee. This is the committee that puts together all the different tours and mixers, networking opportunities. It's a fun committee to come participate in. We meet online once a month, and we look to help with member benefit. Again, the events that we have coming up are the virtual mixer and the Carpenters Training Center tour. Nominations and elections. Russell, you want to take this one?
Yeah, thank you so much. So hi everybody. If I haven't got to meet you, hopefully we'll get there soon. So I'm the chair of our chapter's nominations and elections committee. We have a lot of fun, but there's some things that we have to do according to bylaws. And so determining our chapter's leadership for the next year is one of those things. So our nominations and elections committee is a pretty simple, straightforward body that only meets for a certain amount of time. This committee is going to be done with its work by April. And all our job is just to ensure that nominees and applicants for our elected positions meet the qualifications, and that they understand, we help answer their questions about what the scope of that commitment is. So every year we vote on president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and 3 members at large. And we're building our nominee list. It is okay for us to have a couple different nominees for each position. That's what a vote is for. And so our nominations and elections committee puts that ballot together and presents it to the executive board, who then presents it to the chapter, you guys, for a vote in May, I believe. So if you're looking for a way to contribute to the chapter and to shape our leadership, but you don't want to sign on for a full year of serving on the executive board, or even maybe a committee feels kind of long-term, this is a great bite-sized opportunity just to work with me on a short project for a few months. And that really helps us. But I can't do it by myself. I'm required by our bylaws to consult with a committee on this. So I'd love to hear from you if you're interested in this short, easy, time-bound project to shape our chapter's future leadership. Thanks.
Thanks, Russell. Appreciate that. Programs committee. I think I saw Reed on the call. Would you like to just pop in and say something, Reed, for the committee?
Sure. So we're still working on getting CEUs for all of our meetings like this, and so far that's been going really well. And other than that, we're in the planning stages for fall and winter of this year.
Thanks, Reed. Yeah, Reed's being a little bit humble, but he's got the programs committee has the rest of this year in. We're ready to go with topics and speakers. Going through the CEU process to get the rest of those approved. And we're already looking at topics for next year and identifying additional speakers. Since we're so far ahead, if you do have any ideas on speakers and topics, please send them to myself or anyone on programs. so we could get that in before it's too late. And next month is going to be Toastmasters, and we'll have a little bit of fun learning about some public speaking tips, which is always a very important task for a safety professional, especially speaking with the CEO and C-suite levels. And then March, we have a panel with WISE, which I guess goes into this committee update. So WISE supports the inclusion and advancement of women in the safety industry. So we will have Suzanne and a couple of her committee members from WISE on the panel just to talk about their career path, different challenges, especially being a woman in the safety industry, and how their career paths have unfolded. So it'll be a really fun conversation. I will put the survey link in the chat. At this time, Russell, if you want to introduce our speaker today.
I guess I should unmute myself. Yeah, cool. So Joseph Chacon is a local, but has an impact nationally with what he does in fire protection. So he's got firefighter roots, actually putting on the turnout gear, doing dangerous stuff, but also has a very technical background as a professional fire protection engineer and HazMat technician. He's also involved with the technology side and making this info accessible to folks. He's the creator of the HazMat app. So just a man of many talents in fire protection, working to protect people, property, and the environment in many different avenues. So we're super excited to have Joe. We can't believe that he's just in our backyard. It's amazing to have this much wealth right here just down the road. So thanks so much for joining us, Joe, and take it away, sir.
All right. All right, can everybody hear me?
Good to go.
All right, I seem to have. All right, there we go. So, yes, Russell, thank you for the introduction. Real quick, just a little bit more about me. I got my start in building and fire code consulting in 2001, and I've been working for Turp Consulting. I got my master's degree at University of Maryland in fire protection engineering. My undergrad is in mechanical engineering from UNLV. And yes, I also work for City of Henderson as a hazardous material response technician. So yeah, we'll get started here. When I'm discussing IBC and IFC provisions, I'm going off the assumption that everybody knows that, you know, this is the International Building Code and the International Fire Code that's currently adopted here in Southern Nevada. So there's approximately 50 chapters total in the International Fire Code. 27 of those chapters deal specifically with HazMat. So that's a pretty significant portion of the International Fire Code. That's a little over half of the fire code. And so your HazMat provisions are based both on the International Fire Code and the International Building Code. So we'll get into more detail on that, but you're going to find in the IFC your material specific requirements. And then in the building code, you're going to find your allowable areas for your group H's when you exceed the maximum allowable quantities. You're going to find your fire barriers for your control areas. And again, we'll get into more detail on that. So your requirements are driven by your material and your quantity being stored or used. So it would be pretty impractical for the fire code to address every chemical that there is out there. So if you were going to put, acetone, gasoline, and everything, every single chemical in the fire code, it wouldn't be practical at all. So what the fire code does is it assigns a hazard classification to each chemical. So it'll say your gasoline, your acetone, those are classified as flammable liquid 1Bs. And then it tells you what are your requirements for that specific hazard classification. When you're a flammable liquid 1B, what do you have to do to protect that material? So applying correct requirements relies on accurate classification. So I always give the example of if you're designing a building and you design it, say, as an office space, but it is actually a nightclub, you're going to have some problems, right? You're going to have problems with egress. You're just going to have a lot of compliance requirements if you get that design wrong, right? So same thing is true with HazMat. So if you have a chemical and it's a actual flammable liquid 1A, but you classified it as only a combustible liquid, there's going to be some compliance issues. There's going to be issues with your maximum allowable quantities. It may be a group H and you don't have those provisions incorporated into your design. So one thing that's really interesting about HazMat classification is most of the time in the building and in the fire codes, you're going to see requirements that are black and white that says, if you have this, then you have to do that. So one thing that's interesting about HazMat is in the back of the fire code, you have this strong well section that says it's a strongly subjective process. So meaning, some people can see it this way, some people can see it that way. So this is the only section of any building or fire code where that I know that you see this section that says this is a strongly subjective process. So that said, down there a little bit further down, it says that it could be necessary for HazMat to be tested in a laboratory. So if you have, say, a client that wants to store a material and it's a flammable liquid 1B, but he's got it diluted down to only 10%. So, but he does not have an SDS to support the fact that it is a 1B or it's a combustible liquid. So you can send that to a laboratory and the laboratory can test your flash point and then you can get an idea of where it actually is classified. So it's important to be able to differentiate your IBC and IFC classifications versus all your other classifications. So right here is just an example of DOT classifications compared to your IBC and IFC, but there's other classifications such as GHS and ANSI and OSHA, and there's going to be different definitions of what is classified as a hazardous material. So it's really important that when you're looking at the IFC and the IBC, that you're looking at the specific definitions that are outlined in the IBC and IFC, because there will be situations where something is classified as a certain classification in DOT or any other classification system that's not meeting your definitions in your IBC and your IFC. So if you look over on the left here, you have your physical hazards, and then you have your health hazards. So your health hazards are your corrosives, your highly toxics, and your toxics. So your code impacts are really based on your maximum allowable quantity, and that's referred to as your MAQ. And so in your IBC, you have tables that outline your maximum allowable quantities. So when you're under the MAQ, you're usually a group F, group B, or a group S. So one of the bigger things is you really want to try to avoid that group H occupancy. So when you get into that group H occupancy, there's a lot of different requirements that you have to comply with that are going to really cost a lot of money. So there's different options that you have to avoid the group H occupancy. So you have first control areas where you can break the building up into separate rooms that are separated by fire barriers. And then you can get either 4 control areas, or it depends on your level. The higher you go, the less control areas you're allowed. And so you also have cabinets. If you store your hazardous material in cabinets, and it's not just normal cabinets, there's going to be requirements for your cabinets, but you can double your amount usually when you store in cabinets. And you also have sprinklers. If you have a NFPA 13 sprinkler system or a compliant sprinkler system, then you can also, again, double your amounts. So there's different ways that you can go about avoiding the group H occupancy. So you are allowed 4 control areas on grade level, and your MAQ and your number of control areas are reduced as you increase your level above grade. So once you get over your 4th level, instead of 1 hour separation between your control areas, now you're looking at 2 hours on your upper floors. So when you get pushed into the group H, there's a lot of people that always think that I'm a group H, I can store whatever I want. All right, I can put as much chemicals in this building as I can. So that's not really always the case. You always have to look at your detached building requirements. You may have to have a detached building that has no other occupancies in the building and has a significant separation distance from other buildings. So you also have your spill control, ventilation, emergency alarms. So as you can see, there's quite a bit more requirements that go into having this group H occupancy. So not only do you have those spill control, ventilation, emergency alarm, but when you get into your IBC, your allowable area, your separations, that group H occupancy is obviously a more hazard occupancy. So your type of construction and the allowable areas are limited for your group H. Okay, so HazMat use. Storage that's kind of self-explanatory. So when you have a material that comes into a warehouse and is not opened or not closed, it's put on a shelf and just stored there and then taken out and shipped to a different supplier. That is storage use. So use closed is where you're not open to the atmosphere at all, and all your HazMat is going through piping and through it's piped out of tanks and going. So you can see this tanker truck that's connected in and filling up a tank here. So that's a use closed operation. So your use open, and your use open is specific definition says that it's constantly open to the atmosphere. So this is normally pretty rare. Your use open is open mixing. So if you have big vessels with mixing paddles that are completely open to the atmosphere all the time, that's use open. And also your dip tanks are use open. So you'll see here, I'm going to show you a table of the maximum allowable quantities. You'll see that when your maximum allowable quantities are going to be greatly reduced when you have a use open configuration. And that's just because the hazard is more pronounced with all your vapors being able to go to the atmosphere. So this is one of the tables that's in the IBC, or this was specifically IFC. So you can see here you have your hazard classifications on your left, and then you have your storage.
That's crazy. It went mute, but I think everybody got muted. Stand by, Joe. Joe, try manually unmuting yourself.
Okay, I just heard a beep in my headphones and it sounded like I disconnected there. Ben, do you know how I can present? And as soon as I go into presentation mode, I lose the ability to see everybody.
Yeah, I think that's just a feature. I think that's an unfortunate feature of Google. I think you do lose our faces when you present.
All right, so we'll just go back into presentation mode then. Okay, so you can see your material classifications on your left side here, and your storage, your use closed, and your use open quantities are shown here. And so You can see you have special limits, and then you can see little footnotes on each of the limits, and that just tells you that there's an exception or something you need to look at in the footnote that's going to either allow you to increase it or give you some other type of limitation. So when you're looking at these two, you need to remember that there is a different table for outdoor storage, and outdoor storage is a little more lenient. So your IBC requirements are your control area construction, your group H, your allowable area, your separation distances. So this example here shows, assuming you have a flammable 1B liquid. So your base requirement is 120 gallons, or your base limitation is 120 gallons. So you can see in this example that they built 1 hour control areas or 1 hour barriers and separated it into 4 control areas. So now you get that 120 gallons in each one of those control areas. So we talked earlier about the detached building. So if you go over a certain amount, and this is exceeding the MAQ, it's a different amount, a different table, but you have to have an attached building. And there's also requirements for explosion control. So say you have a large amount of flammable liquid 1Bs or 1As, 1Cs, and you're doing an open mixing or you're doing dip tanks, anything like that where you have a huge hazard and it's the vapors are free to escape into the atmosphere, you're usually going to require explosion control on that. And one thing that's important to remember too is when you're looking in the building code, there's a section in the building code for outdoor storage. So if you put a canopy, a non-combustible canopy over your hazmat, there's going to be limitations on your walls. So you have to have a certain amount of openings. So there is a lot of people that like to put the canopies there and then put a CMU walls around it, either for security or for whatever. And there's a section in there that says you can only obstruct a certain amount of your outdoor storage. And then another important one is that you're also only limited to 1,500 square feet when you do those canopy. Okay, so your IFC requirements, Chapter 50 is going to give you your general requirements. So when you exceed the MAQ, Chapter 50 is going to be where you go for, okay, well, what type of spill control, what type of containment do I need to provide? So when you're providing spill control and containment in an indoor area, not only do you have to contain the largest vessel, but you have to contain the flow from your sprinklers. And so also if you have an outdoor area, you have to contain the largest vessel, plus you have to account for rainfall. So it's also going to tell you about your cabinet construction, the thickness of your steel, automatic closing doors, everything that has to be required if you're going to use that cabinet allowance to increase your allowable storage. And then it's going to give you also your ventilation requirements. Typically, this is going to be 1 CFM per square foot, and it's going to be required to be on emergency power. It's going to give you your signage. So where do you have to provide your 704 placards? And usually that's going to be on your tanks themselves and at the entrance to all your entrances into the building. You're also going to have a separate section on emergency alarms. And so this can typically just be a pull station at your exits so that when there is a hazmat emergency, someone can look at a pull station and notify everybody in the building that there's an emergency. So your chapters 51 through 67, that's where you're going to get into your material specific requirements. So once you exceed your MAQ, you have to look at chapter 50, make sure you comply with all the requirements in chapter 50. And then you got to look at your specific hazard classification. So if you're over in flammable liquids, you'll also go over to chapter 57 and say, okay, now I complied with all of chapter 50. What else do I have to do to comply with the flammable liquid requirements? And then there's also oxidizers, organic peroxides. There's specific chapters on each hazard classification. So why is classification important? So we'll take a look at this table here and you can see, let's look at the oxidizers here. So if you're an oxidizer class 3, you're allowed 10 pounds. If you're an oxidizer class 2, you're allowed 250 pounds. So let's give an example of you have a client or a customer that wants to store 100 pounds, right? So they're either well over in class 3 or they're well under in class 2. So if we look over at the definition off to the right of what is an oxidizer class 2 versus a class 3, look at that definition. It says causes a severe increase, class 3, class 2 causes a moderate increase. So what if your SDS says this oxidizer causes an increase in the burning rate and it doesn't use severe or moderate? And what do you do? So in a situation like that, you're either well under or well above. You're either a group H or you're not, you're fine. So in a situation like that just requires further investigation. You'll have to start looking at what are your ingredients? What are the hazard classification of your ingredients? Not only what are the hazard classification of your ingredients, but at what concentration. So you can see here of this just demonstrates the importance of getting that right between whether it's a class 2 or class 3 as your oxidizers. And looking down farther too, look at your water reactives. Between a class 3 and a class 2, you know, it's 50 and 5. So your classification process, it has to really be a systematic approach. You want to start with your safety data sheet and you have references ready available. So you obviously need your IFC definitions because these are going to be specific to your hazard classifications. And you really need to have these definitions so that you have a quantifiable value when you're doing these classifications. So when you're looking at a flash point, you can tell whether it's a 1A, 1B, 1C. So it's also important to have your GHS definitions because what you'll find is on a lot of safety data sheets, you're going to have your GHS information and nothing on your fire codes. So one thing that's important, if you have those GHS definitions, a lot of the times you can correlate over to the IFC requirements. And if you look at NFK 704, where you have, everybody's familiar with 704 placard, it's the blue, red, yellow, and then the special hazards in the middle. So the NFPA, if you look at the actual NFPA document and you look at the different hazard categories and their hazard classification on whether it's assigned a 0 through 4, that'll kind of give you an idea of some of the hazard classification that you're going to be dealing with on that safety data sheet. Some other helpful resources is the appendix in the IFC. If you look at that appendix, there's actually examples. So if you look at, say your oxidizers, it'll say these are examples of oxidizer class 3s. And it'll give you several examples of whatever that hazard classification is. And the same is true for NFPA 400. If you look at NFPA 400, they also have some examples in there. So when you're starting out looking at your safety data sheet, look at your 704 placard if they have it on there. So if they have it on there, you could kind of get an idea of, am I looking at health hazards? Am I looking at flammability hazards? Am I looking at reactivity hazards? You want to start looking at what are the chemicals in the product? What are they? What concentration are they? How does it enter your body? So is it inhalation hazard? Is it corrosive? How can it affect your health in the short term and the long term? Then you have your first aid measures in the bottom. So as you're examining this SDS, the biggest things to look for are signal words. So look for things that say like harmful if swallowed, flammable, reacts violently with, causes skin burns, keep away from, avoid extreme temperatures. So all these kind of verbiage inside your SDS just kind of should set up a red flag and like, hey, I need to look into this a little bit more and start looking at my definitions to see where this hazard classification comes in. So this is kind of just an example of how your GHS and your IFC compares as far as toxicity. If you look over on the left side, the GHS classifications use the acute toxicity estimate, but your IFC uses LD50s and LC50s. So they're not in a direct comparison, but if you see a GHS that's maybe a category 1 or a category 2, again, that should set off a red flag saying, this is probably going to be an LC50 that I need to look at, and I need to look at my concentrations because it's probably going to. Can you guys hear me? I keep
Yep.
sounds like my All right, can you hear me now?
You're good.
Yeah, you're good, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why my headphones keep disconnecting. Let's get back to the. Okay, so yeah, it's just important to know that your acute toxicity estimates and your LC50s, again, not a direct comparison, but it's something that you should see maybe a red flag saying, hey, I need to look at this a little bit better. And so here is an example. So you're looking at a specific product, it'll tell you your acute toxicity estimate is 4.9. And so just to give you an example here, if you're less than 5, it is toxic. If you're less than 5 at an LC50, it's toxic. So when you look down, our LC50 is 3.6, but that's only a component within this specific material. So when you look at the concentration of your glycolic acid, it's 60 to 100%. And then it's 3.6 milligrams per liter of an LC50, and we know that less than 5 is toxic. So you look up at your acute toxicity estimate, it's 4.9. So although it's pretty close, we are toxic. So it's just important to look at that and not write that off because we don't have an LC50 for our product. Well, we have an LC50 that's 60 to 100%, and that meets the toxic criteria. So we're going to call this material toxic. So looking at our GHS definitions versus IFC for as far as your skin corrosion, sometimes you may see in a SDS, it says skin corrosion / irritation category 2. Well, if we look at category 2, you're seeing corrosion, so you're thinking, okay, this is a corrosive material. But if you look at category 2, it says reversible adverse effects in the dermal tissue. If you look down at your IFC, it says a chemical that causes visible destruction or irreversible alterations. So it may not be necessarily toxic or corrosive at a category 2. So you'll just have to look more into that SDS and see, all right, is this actually a corrosive? Does it cause visible destruction or irreversible alterations? And one thing's important to you, I have this highlighted here, is this term does not refer to action on inanimate surfaces. So you'll see sometimes in a SDS that it'll say, this is corrosive to metals, but then you will not see anything else in there that it may say this is an irritant on your skin, but it's corrosive to metals. So in that case, it would not be classified as corrosive. Okay, your IBC and IFC flammable and combustible liquids. Your 1A used to be pretty rare, but with a lot of the cannabis extraction, they're using a lot of 1As now for cannabis extraction. So you're starting to see a lot of more 1As being stored and used in facilities. So these are your most dangerous, flash point below 73 and a boiling point below 100. Your 1Bs are your flash points between 73 or above 100. These are probably your most typical. This is your gasoline, ethanol, acetone. And then you have your 1Cs, flash point at or above 100. So, and then you also have combustible liquids. This is just here to give you an idea that when you look at this flash point, it needs to fall between one of these to get your hazard classification, whether it's a 1A, 1B, or 1C. And so one thing too is if you look down at combustible liquid, a lot of times the SDS will just say flash point at or above 200. So if it's at or above 200, it's still a combustible liquid class 3B. Your requirements are pretty lenient for your combustible liquid 3Bs. So again, this slides in here just kind of show you that there is quite a few different definitions. So if you look at your ANSI, DOT, UN, OSHA, there's different requirements and different flash points for your definitions of your flammable versus your combustibles. So here's just an HMIS. So I think a lot of people are familiar with the hazardous material inventory statement. So this is required usually as part of your permit submittals. So when you're submitting for a permit, the AHJ is going to want to see what's the material called, what's the component, is it solid, gas, liquid, your CAS numbers, your location where it's used, your hazard classification, your NFPA 704 ratings, whether it's a 2, 3, instability, your container sizes, your amount in storage. all this needs to be outlined on your hazardous material inventory statement. So we'll go through a real quick example here. So if you have 10 gallons of acetone, 10 gallons of gasoline for a total flammable liquid 1B of 20 gallons, let's look over at our table here. We're allowed 120 gallons in storage, right? So for 1B and 1Cs, we're allowed 120 gallons. So your 20 gallons is below your MAQ. So this would be classified as your whatever use the building is. So whether it's a class B or occupancy group B, occupancy group F, storage, you're going to fall into those requirements right there. And really all you need to do is apply for a permit. So what about 140 gallons if you're only over by 20? So again, we always want to try and avoid that group H occupancy classification. So the biggest thing there is how can we avoid that with a limitation of 120 and we have 140 gallons. So if the building is sprinklered, then we can get 240 gallons we can double that. So if we don't have sprinklers in the building, we can put these in cabinets. So if we put everything in the cabinets, again, we're going to be allowed to double that to 240. So looking down farther, well, what about 500 gallons? So if we're at 500 gallons, then what do we do? So if we go back to the slides earlier, we were looking at, okay, well, what are our options? We have control areas, right? So if you're at 500 gallons and you want to put everything in cabinets also, then each control area is going to be 240 gallons. So you can do 3 or 4 control areas if you needed to increase your storage to more than 500 gallons. Okay, and one of the resources Russ had mentioned is the hazmatapp.com. So it is a free mobile version that you can download on your phone. And this is just kind of a tool that you can use to look up different classifications. So if you have different ingredients in an SDS that you're looking at, you can look at this and say, okay, well, you know, I have sulfuric acid at 90%, 90 to 99. I know it's a water reactive class 2, a corrosive and a toxic. And when you're looking at your safety data sheet, you can say, okay, well, this is 60 to 70% of my full chemical. So now you can say, okay, well, if it's at 60 to 70%, then it's likely taking on these hazard classifications of the sulfuric acid. So I'm going to show you guys a little demonstration of the other version of it here. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, so on the paid version here, you can look up your different chemicals. So say you wanted to look up acetone. There's your acetone right there. You can click on the CAS number. And you can see that's a flammable liquid 1B. And then your health hazard is no hazard classification here. But what's important to remember is that this is based on IBC and IFC classifications. So you can see here health hazard is a 2. So it may have some type of health hazard associated with it. But as far as your health hazards with the building and fire code, there's no hazard classification.
So, hey, Joe, it's only showing like the landing page for the app. It wasn't keeping up with you scrolling through the info for that CAS number.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Oh, okay. It's just showing that. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, so here it is. So if you're just scrolling, so you want to see your acetone,
Nice.
then you click on it there. So you can see the health hazard. We have no hazard classification. Again, this is IBC and IFC. So you may have, so you're seeing a 2 in your health hazards here. So you may have it may be classified as an irritant. So as far as DOT or GHS or somebody else may be calling this another type of hazard, but as far as your building and fire codes, your no hazard classification as far as health hazard. So your only concern is going to be your flammable liquid class 1B classification. And so one thing here, I set this property up earlier. So you can do control areas also with the HazMat app. So you can have control area 1, control area 2. And so if we wanted to add another chemical in here, we could just add it to control area 1. So we wanted to put in some toluene. Then you just add your container sizes and your amount in storage. You can hit save report. You generate your report. And so can you guys all see this, the Excel spreadsheet, or do I need to?
No, the presenter view just stayed on the app.
Okay, we should be able to see the HMIS now.
Yep.
Okay, so this just generated our HMIS for us. So now we could see your product name, your product names here, your whether it's a solid, liquid, gas, your CAS numbers, and what area it's at, whether it's in control area 1, control area 2, your container sizes, your classifications, your total amount in storage, and then your NFPA 704 hazard rankings. So on your next tab over here, then it totals up everything in each control area so that you can look at your maximum level quantity and see if you're in compliance with the code. So you can see in control area number 1, our totals of flammable liquid 1B is 25 gallons. So if we remember looking at that table before, we're allowed 120 gallons in each control area. So our control area 1 would be in compliance. So looking down here, we have our total flammable liquid 1As are 1 gallon, total corrosives are 5, total toxics are 5, and your total unstable reactives 5. Okay, so that was it. And this is just a QR code. And I think, Ben, do you want to have this available? I can send you or I can email you the PowerPoint if you want to have it available for people to download or take a look at later.
Yeah, that'd be great, Joe.
So I was gonna say, here's my contact information too. So I want to put that up there too, because I'm always willing to talk about HazMat classifications with anybody. If you're kind of struggling looking at a classification, or if you do see something in the HazMat app and you have a question of, hey, why is this classified like this? Why'd you classify it this way? I think it's this. Let's have a conversation about it. There's my contact information there. Let's at this time I can close this down and we can open it up to any questions that people have.
That app is killer. Thank you. That's really cool.
Yeah, no problem. So do we have any questions about classifications or any project specific things that people have run into? And maybe the fire marshal has been one way and you think is one way, and you're kind of looking for to meet in the middle somewhere, anything like that?
Quick question. You kind of get hit with a little bit of difficulties here because typically, I mean, obviously OSHA applies to construction when we're building a facility, but then once the facility's in operation, then we're in typically the OSHA general industry standards. With the fire code, obviously we're building a facility to the fire code. And so we do it in accordance with the fire code. And then OSHA comes along and says, no, what you're doing is wrong. And I haven't gotten into that specifically, but what I've gotten into is, and I'm going back in, you know, the Uniform Building Code, Uniform Fire Code. Obviously today it's the International Building Code, International Fire Code, IFC, like you're pointing out. And what's frustrating is the building code will tell me I can do this.
Right.
And then the fire code says, no, you can't do that. And, you know, and along comes the fire marshal. And obviously the fire marshal is God. And the fire marshal red tags your facility. It doesn't matter if you have a certificate of occupancy or not, you know, you're shut down. What do you do in the situation where there's a conflict between the fire code and what OSHA's telling you?
Well, you really have to go with the most conservative one and comply with the most conservative requirements. So if your fire marshal is more conservative than your OSHA requirements, then you have to comply with the fire marshal requirements.
But a lot of times, if I built my facility, I built it to the fire code and the building code, and now we're in operation, and OSHA comes through on a spot inspection, that type of thing, and says, no, you're not in compliance.
Right. Well, yeah, then you really still have to comply with the most conservative requirement. So yeah, you really, then at that point, you're going to also have to comply with the OSHA requirements. And it really would be nice if everybody could get on the same page with the same definitions. That would make everybody's life easier, and not just with the same definitions, but with the same requirements too. So if you have a Group H building and you're in compliance with the fire code, then yes, then you're also in compliance with OSHA requirements and all the other requirements that are out there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hey, Joe, this is Craig. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My area that I work in is aircraft accident investigation. So, of course, we're really concerned with lithium-ion batteries and things that people bring on airplanes. Relating that to structures, this has been mostly about chemical and physical hazards. What about electrical or hazards resulting from thermal runaway? Is that addressed anywhere for somebody who's storing or maintaining a facility with a bunch of lithium-ion batteries or high-energy batteries in them?
Yeah, so when you store your lithium and your energy batteries like that, take a look in the brand new fire code that just got adopted, the 2021 fire code. There's a lot of requirements in there that came out of a lot of different UL testing that's not in the 2018 version. So some of the different jurisdictions here have already gone to the 2021. Clark County has not, but there's quite a few different requirements just based on experiences and tests conducted that are in the 2021. But yeah, as far as when you're looking at your MAQs and your Group H's and stuff, so you don't really fall into a lot of that for your lithium-ion battery storage, mostly because you're going to look at that chapter. I don't remember what chapter it is in the 2021, but there's a lot of requirements in there for when you have a certain amount of batteries. You're going to require sprinkler protection, and there's a lot of how thermal runaways addressed in the newer version of the adopted code. I thought I did see somebody with a hand up.
I think that might have been Craig, but he jumped in. Joe, how often are those inspections? I've been to a few dry cleaners, which seem like they've never been inspected in the entire time they've been in business, looking at their chemical storage.
Well, yeah, it's funny because we'll walk into a building as a consultant, and I will look at somebody and say, "Oh my God, when was the last time your building was inspected? So, and I'll be there looking at something else. I'll be looking at maybe they'll be looking at smoke detectors or sprinklers, and then I'll look at their hazmat storage and say, you guys have a problem here. So it's really up to the jurisdiction. Some of the jurisdictions are really on it. And a lot of times it comes down to whether people pulled a permit or not. So if you pulled a permit, they're going to go after, and you're going to have a renewable permit every year. You have to renew it. Then the inspector's going to come out every year. So if you just started storing chemicals and you never pulled a permit for it, a lot of people sometimes don't know what the permit amounts are. So if they just start storing chemicals and using chemicals without knowing they need a permit, then they'll likely never get inspected, because that's a lot of times what the jurisdictions go off of, whether you have a permit to do that or not. So yeah, it just depends on, it's jurisdiction dependent. And a lot of the jurisdictions here in Southern Nevada, they're really hurting for inspectors. So a lot of it comes down to they're just too busy. They're just not getting to all the properties that they need to get to, even the ones that do have the permit.
So Joe, I'm imagining that most places that that you inspect or that you consult with probably don't have like an embedded full-time safety and health professional. Is that correct?
It depends. So a lot of times I'm brought in on projects that it's a 60,000 square foot facility that is a Group H. It's a dedicated building. There's no other occupancy in there. They're well above the MAQs, and they do have safety professionals on site that their only job is to maintain that inventory, maintain the fire safety manuals, maintain the hazardous material management plans, and be that liaison for the fire department when the fire department does show up.
Okay.
But yeah, when you have, a small warehouse that's maybe barely over the Group H, and they just have a small Group H room, maybe a 500 square foot closet where they're barely over the MAQ. They usually don't have the safety professionals and all that with buildings of that scale.
Got it. So, I mean, with places that don't have someone managing this full time, what, in your experience, what's the one thing or the key principle you wish they knew or that they put into practice?
The key principle I wish they knew is a lot of times people change distributors. So they'll be working with one distributor. Oh, I found this chemical cheaper with this other distributor. Well, that distributor uses a higher concentration. And so now, we looked at that oxidizer class. Well, now we're pushed into an oxidizer class 3 because this is a higher concentration. So you saw how much that changes. You could not be a Group H, and now all of a sudden you're a Group H, just based on the concentration because you changed distributors. So one of the key things is, it's when they change distributors or just when they change quantities. Sometimes, a client will be working and have a major order for another product. And so now they just doubled the amount of flammables they have to fulfill this order. So when they first came to you, this is what they were storing. And now it's true, that's what they were storing. But now they're trying to fulfill this order for a client. So they just double the requirements. So something I wish they knew is that they really need to engage someone as some type of safety professional every time they change quantities. And even if it's just changing manufacturers or, a small change in the amount they're storing. Because a lot of times you could be, if you're allowed 240, and we did the initial analysis at 230, and they're like, oh, we're just storing 20 gallons more, we're okay. Well, no, you're not. So yes, changing in inventories is something that, I wish that a lot of people kept more up to date on.
Cool, thanks.
Do we have any additional comments or questions for Joe? Is anybody here storing any chemicals on their sites?
We all have some bleach on hand, right?
Yes. So yes, when you're over a certain amount, you need to apply for a permit.
Exactly. Or sulfuric acid.
Yeah. So one thing too, in the beginning of your IFC, the first couple chapters, you'll find the permit amount. So the permit amount it's actually surprising for some chemicals. But yeah, so you'll find your permit amounts, and then you need to apply for that permit. Once you get that permit, then you'll be good to go.
Well, Joe, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Southern Nevada chapter of ASSP for presenting today and sharing your expertise. This is really good information for us.
Well, good. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll be making use of that app for sure.
Okay.
Same,
again, if you have any-
actually. Thank you.